He was a very bright, highly efficient, well-liked, process-driven person that just plain got things done. The issue is that he sometimes moved too fast, didn't bring his team along, knocked things over along the way, messes had to be cleaned up, and then because he wasn't involved with his people, it's really what it comes down to in the decision making.
Welcome to Season 3 of Conversations with Coaches. This is a stakeholder-centered coaching production where we believe everyone deserves a stakeholder-centered leader. I'm Brandon Murgard, your host for the show. This season, we go deep into the case study library to discuss the real-life challenges of leaders and the coaches who help them succeed. As an added bonus, we're giving away the latest installment of our case study library, which includes case study summaries, show notes from each episode, and ways you can connect with the guest. Get your copy today at mgscc.net/case-studies. Today, we're excited to have Dan Sitner, a seasoned executive coach, and the founder of Clear Purpose Coaching, as he takes us through the profound journey of a senior leader in manufacturing at a global sporting goods organization. Facing challenges in both decision-making and team communication, Dan applied his expertise with stakeholder-centered coaching to foster significant leadership growth. Join us as we explore the power of engaging stakeholders, the importance of behavioral change, and how intentional, targeted coaching can lead to impactful business outcomes. Come on in and let's find out more about the client.
Yes, this is a global sporting goods manufacturer. It's a family-owned company. It's been in existence for about 100 years. And very well-known products that they make out there. So they've got a great reputation. So it's just a great company.
And how did they get in touch with it? Tell me the story about how we went from the company reaching out to you actually starting the coaching.
Yeah, so the company reached out to me, and I was interviewed along with 2 or 3 other coaches. I don't know who they were, and it just turned out that this particular problem that they wanted solved was a behavioral problem, which, as you know, stakeholder-centered coaching that's what it's focused on, is changing behaviors. And most of the time, leaders don't even understand the behavior that they might have that isn't working for their teams around them. And it was just a perfect fit. I got the job, I think, just because I had the right solution.
And what was the stakes? So we've got a senior manufacturing leader moving too fast, but seems to be, fairly effective. What was the stakes if he wasn't able to improve in this particular behavior?
Well, they never actually articulated to me what the stakes would be. There was no indication that they were looking to, certainly, this is a last chance endeavor, and I'm brought in to save this individual. They liked him, many things about him. They did make it clear to me that they weren't looking to elevate his position in the company. In other words, have him take on a bigger role. They really liked him in the role he was in, and they just wanted him to become a more effective leader in his current role.
So it sounds like this is a leader who doesn't have, I should say coaches are generally working with someone with a terminal problem. They're on their way out the organization if they don't fix it, or it is purely developmental, looking to improve effectiveness. It sounds like this is the latter.
Yes, totally agree, 100%.
And out of curiosity, when HR reached out to you, you're speaking with this VP of HR, they're talking about the issue. How did they articulate it to you? How did they say, this is the problem that we want you to solve?
Well, Brandon, what I typically will do is I will send the leader or whoever the point person is I'm working with. Typically it's HR, but not always. It might be a CEO or president, owner, whatever. I will send them a few documents ahead of time, right? And one of those documents is the most frequently selected areas for leadership development. And so during the conversation, I will ask them, and I'll send it to them ahead of time before I even meet with them, and ask them, if you have time, look at this. And then on the call, I will asked them and if they got a chance to review it. And in this case, they both the VP of HR and I had his manager on the call also. They both had a chance to review it, and both of them zeroed in on communication and listening with intent. So that's how we got to it pretty quickly. It did not take long at all.
Okay. So the first time you sat down with this leader, what were you noticing? What were you seeing? What was your general experience the first time that you actually sat down across from this leader eye to eye and had your first conversation?
Actually, that would be this. We had a meeting after I met with his boss and the VP of HR. We scheduled a meeting shortly after that, in which it was a Zoom meeting in which the leader was on the call also, and then walked through the same process with the leader, explained to the leader what the process was about, really wanted to just make sure that the leader would be comfortable working with me. And he was, and so that was the next step in the process. And from that point on, then I started doing, got a list of people to interview for behavioral interviews. And I think I was around 10 people, if I recall. And so then I started doing the behavioral interviews. And then once I got those done, those take about maybe 20 minutes for each person. Then I wrote a report, with the common themes and sent that first to the leader, because this is personal now, right? And probably what in most cases, and particularly what I found with this gentleman, was a little bit surprised at the feedback, right? And they always want to focus on the negative part of the feedback. And so I had to spend a bit of time coaching him. Well, look at all the positive things. 80% of this is all positive. So, I don't want you to overlook that stuff. Let's not dwell on that stuff, but, let's look at what the opportunities are here. And he came around to it relatively quickly. And when we move forward from there. And
when you write this report, do the individuals who provide the feedback, does their feedback show up with their name? Is this, secretive or confidential feedback?
Yep. It's all anonymous feedback except for the leader's manager. The leader's manager's comments are visible. And I let the leader's manager know that. So both the leader and the manager are aware of that going into it. Everybody else's are anonymous and in rater groups, clumped together in rater groups.
Okay, good. Well, let's kind of walk through step by step how this whole thing came about. So to situate the story, the global sporting goods manufacturing firm has a leader who's very effective, very well-liked, respected, but could stand to shave off some of the edges on their communication. HR reaches out to you, you come in, you and the leader build instant rapport, do a behavioral interview report. What happened next? And then talk us through the kind of how you approach this problem.
Okay, so what happened after the behavioral interviews? Well, first, as I said, I supplied the report first to the leader because it's personal and let him digest it for a few days. Then I asked him to send it on to his boss and the VP of HR, give them a few days to look it over, right? And then in the meantime, while they were doing that, the leader then started to, debrief the assessment and started formulating a list of who we thought the stakeholders should be, and also started formulating our goal and our action plan. And then when we had a chance, we then went back and had a meeting with his boss and the VP of HR. And of course, they've already read the reports by now. And there wasn't any shocking news in this report. The feedback came out, which is basically that, yes, he didn't always listen to people's ideas. And in fact, one of the things that he really had to work on was, not being the first one to actually say what the solution was in a meeting, to listen to what other people had to say first, listen to their point of view and their solutions before, because he had let's just put it this way. He'd already decided most of the time what the course of action was going to be. And it didn't really matter at what anybody else thought, if his idea was going to be the winning idea. And so that was something that we really had to work on. So then we presented when we had that meeting with his boss and the VP of HR, we presented what our goal was and what our action plan was, and got them to agree and buy off on it. And we also presented a list of who we thought the best stakeholders would be. And in this case, I believe I interviewed about 10 people for the behavioral interviews or the 360 assessment. And I believe probably like 8 of those were actually stakeholders also. And I believe we ended up with about 10 stakeholders in total too, if I recall.
Okay. Well, just for people who maybe don't fully know your process, what is the difference between someone who's involved in behavioral interviews versus a stakeholder? What makes a good stakeholder in your opinion?
Well, a good stakeholder is someone that works around the leader and observes them regularly. You can't just see the leader once a month or, occasionally. So you might interview in some cases. I know that people have, I haven't done this yet, but you may even interview maybe someone doesn't even work for the company for that initial feedback. They could be a supplier. They could be, it could be a family member. In some cases, I know people's wives or significant others have been interviewed for feedback. We didn't do that in this case. So a good stakeholder has to be able to observe the leader so they can see them in action and see them working on their goal and their action steps, and also see the change actually taking place. And they need to not just be the leader's fan club also, And so, then after we had selected those stakeholders, well, then we had a meeting to enroll the stakeholders. And during that meeting where we enroll the stakeholders, the leader then, that's where the leader goes public. I think you might have mentioned this earlier, with his goal and his action plan. He starts off first by thanking all those stakeholders. Said, I recently went through this 360 assessment. Thank you so much for all the positive feedback that I received. And we'll list 2 or 3 of those items, such as, blah, blah, blah. Then he'll say, and I also found some things and understand there's 1 or 2 areas that I can get better at, and I want to get better at it. Will you help me? And, it's rare that anybody says they won't help you. And so I haven't had anybody do that yet. So then he also lets them know that, hey, it's really important that you give me honest feedback and honest suggestions. Forget about everything else that's happened in the past. I can't change the past. The past is history. From this day forward, though, I want to get better at this. And if you'll be willing to give me feedback and suggestions on a monthly basis, that will really help me. I need your support to get better in this goal. And also, if there's something that you want to get better at, let me know what that is too. And I will also provide suggestions for you. So now this is 2-way, not just 1-way, right? Not like, oh, well, I'm the only one that has a problem here. Nobody else has a problem. So let's get everybody involved. And don't be cynical and don't be, joking around. Let's all help each other get better. And so that's the other part of this that is impactful. And honestly, a lot of times the stakeholders won't really come up with anything in that initial meeting that they'll say that they want to get better at. So that would be the next step. And then also remind those stakeholders, he reminds the stakeholders to don't sugarcoat things, be honest with me, because sugarcoating's not going to help me get better. Be truthful and honest throughout this process. So that's the next step in the process. And then from there, after that meeting, at the end of that meeting, we ask all the stakeholders to send their first initial 1 or 2 suggestions for him by email. And then we use those to kind of kick the process off and start with a monthly stakeholder check-in process. So.
Wow. Okay. So you actually integrate other stakeholders into the coaching. So if an organization calls you for coaching, that leader is going to get coached, but everyone else is going to have access to the process as well.
Absolutely.
Wow. Okay. Good. So, this sounds like the end of phase 1. You've set up your contract with the client, done the feedback, selected something to get better at, enrolled the stakeholders, asked for feed forward. What happened next?
So what happens next is we collect the feed forward and the suggestions from the stakeholders, and then the leader and I will decide if any of those we're going to implement. By the way, I forgot to say, in the stakeholder meeting, when we're enrolling the stakeholders, we let them know that not every suggestion can be implemented. We'll think about them. We'll respond to which ones we are going to implement, if any, and then we'll move forward there. Just tell them it's not a democratic process. We have to pick the right ones to help the leader reach his goal, right? And the organization reach their goal, because the goal has to be good for both the leader and the organization. So then from that process, then the leader starts working his action plan. And the action plan generally, I generally will have 4 to 6 action steps. So they have a goal and 4 to 6 related action steps. And the reason for that is if you just have one action step with multiple, it avoids a single point of failure. Oh, I never saw this person do that one step, but they may have seen him do the other steps, right? So that's the idea behind that. And then the leader has a daily checklist, which is just those action steps. And every day I put it into an Excel spreadsheet that when he checks the box, if he actually did that, he or she did that action step, it turns green. And if they didn't have an opportunity to do that particular one that day, just stays yellow. And if they didn't do it and should have done it, it turns red if they put an X in it. So that way, at the end of the week, when we have our weekly call, we can just look at that and hopefully we see green.
You've been very generous in sharing some of these tools, especially in our forums like office hours. And I've been very impressed with the way that your daily checklist is laid out. I've seen hundreds of these all the way back when Marshall was doing some of these back in the early 2000s, maybe even late 90s. But I've been very impressed with the way that you laid this out. What kind of impact did that have for the leader in their day-to-day implementation of their action plan?
Well, it's their really personal accountability tool, if that's one way you want to look at it. And I make it simple and fast, right? And so all you got to do is, you can do this in Excel, you can do it on a mobile app. All you got to do is click the boxes. And I also would have down below a comment section. So if they had anything that stuck out during that week, they could make a comment about it. We could talk about it. But the impact that it has is visible. It's very quick, very easy, and it really keeps the leader centered. Just to look at that every day. It takes like maybe 2 minutes, and keeps them right on task. And so it's there's many different ways to do it, as you alluded to. I'm sure there's mobile apps nowadays that you could use that's developed by somebody else, and probably even better than what I use, but it worked well.
Mm-hmm. That's the thing. If it works, that's the most important thing. Well, I mean, and it seems to. So, and we'll get there. But tell me, what was your operational mode? What did your session structure look like? How long are you spending together? What are you doing?
Okay, so we would have a call, once a week call at a set time, and that call was scheduled for a half hour and rarely lasted a half hour. One of the things that is really valuable in the stakeholder-centered coaching process, and was very valuable in this engagement, is time efficiency. Because a lot of people, when they think that, okay, I'm going to hire a coach, first of all, you got to get away from that charging by the phone call and by the hour stuff and all of that. It really doesn't matter. What you really got to do is deliver value and, guaranteed results. And so the way I do it is, hey, if you don't get better, you don't score at least, I'll say a 33%, if we got a +1, -3, +3 a scoring system on our mini surveys, you don't score at least a +1 at that last mini survey, then I forfeit, half my pay. That's the way that I do it. So now I have skin in the game also. There's no advantage to me spending more time than is absolutely necessary with the client. The less time I spend with the client, the better for me and the better for them, as long as we get the results. So everything that I try to do, and particularly in this case, we were in global supply chain, pandemic problems. There was all kinds of chaos going on. And this leader was a very fast-paced business. I mean, you got a production environment. This stuff has to go out the door. Or the company's not going to make any money. So there's a lot of pressure to keep the manufacturing going. And so I really do I think the big value in the stakeholder-centered coaching process is that it is time efficient. So you asked about where do we go from there? Okay, first monthly stakeholder check-in meeting, right? Starts 1 month later. Okay, well, what does that look like? The leader's got to have a meeting with 10 stakeholders. How would I possibly have time for this? Well, these meetings last, probably 2 to 3 minutes is all the time that you need. Leader says to the stakeholder, hey, Fred, I told you I wanted to, be a better communicator, listen with intent, whatever that is. Can you tell me 1 or 2 things that you noticed over the last 30 days that I did well in that area? And he writes them down. And can you give me 1 or 2 suggestions for the next 30 days? Writes them down. It doesn't take long to do that with 10 people if you just use that approach. And so really, once that ball gets rolling, and that goes on for 12, in this case, it went on 17 months because I always tell leaders, this is a 12-month process. It's probably going to end up taking 15 months. So just plan on it because life happens. And in this case, it took 17 months to actually get it done. So, but again, I like to stress the fact that my goal as a coach is not to take up their time other than what's needed. And they really, in this case particular, was really appreciated, and it worked really well, even though we kept the time down to what I think was a bare minimum.
Well, tell me kind of what happened as a result. So he's got this area, asking for suggestions, meeting with you regularly. You're saying it went well. Tell us kind of, how did you measure that?
Yeah. So we were getting good feedback, and every month after we get the stakeholders' feedback and suggestions, then I would review them with the leader, and we would make any course correction that was needed. Maybe I don't think we changed our action plan the whole time. There were the action steps. It just really wasn't necessary, which tells me with the first action steps that we put together were pretty solid. But we would still look at the suggestions. We would make any, we keep track of how many stakeholders. You don't always get, he had 10 stakeholders. You don't always get to all 10 of them every month. This person might be on vacation, or, there's a death in the family, whatever. But I would keep track of that as a coach. Okay, hey, I've noticed that you've missed Sean. You've only got to Sean 3 times in his first 6 months. You really need to put a concerted effort to make sure you connect with Sean and get his feedback. So we do that, and then we keep it going. In about the 6 months, I think it was 5 or 6 months, we did our first mini survey. And this is a process where +3, -3 score, that evaluates the leader's performance to this point. And the stakeholders are the ones that are evaluating the performance, not the leader, not myself, not the leader's boss. The stakeholders fill out this mini survey. Again, only takes 5 minutes to do. And then we get a score. Well, it's +3, -3 scale. His very first mini survey, he finished his 1.8. It sounds really low in a score, but it's really about a 60% improvement, which was pretty impressive. And the leader had set a goal of getting a 2 on his last survey. So he was close to that on the mini survey. So at the same time, we wanted to do better. So we re-strategized. We did an after action review. What did we set out to do? What happened? What are we going to do differently? And the thing that we noticed on the mini survey was that there was some gaps in a couple of the groups. His peer group scored. The group of his peers scored a little bit lower than everybody else. And so when I asked him why, and I said, what can we do? Is that an opportunity? What can we work on there? Well, he recognized that, again, you're in a global pandemic. A lot of people weren't working in the office. They were working from home. You weren't having meetings like you were. So he wasn't seeing some of these people. They weren't as visible. So he had to make a concerted effort to really go find these people and reach out to them. And whether it was Zoom, a phone call, whatever he had to do to connect with them, that was one strategy. The other thing that showed up was that his direct reports, who he had the most interactions with, their score was a little bit lower. And so what he did is a good strategy. He actually changed their work schedule, because remember, a manufacturing business runs 24/7 in many cases, and so the person's shift might not align with his. So he ended up changing around their work schedules so that he saw those direct reports every Wednesday, on purpose, just for this reason. And then he also scored himself, I believe, on the first mini survey a little bit higher than everybody else. And so I wanted him to really ponder, why is that? You really need to think about this, because your perception of yourself is a little bit better than everybody else is giving you credit for. So just stop and think about that. I didn't really give him any new strategy of what to do for that. I just wanted him to make aware that, and it wasn't a lot. It wasn't a lot. So yeah, we just, at that 6 month, that's what we did. And what really impressed me was, it would have been easy for him to just say, 1/8's good enough. And it would have been, everybody was satisfied at that point, including the VP of HR. But real easy to just say, well, I can just cruise this out from here. But no, and I didn't, as a coach, we drilled down on the areas that we thought we could do better on. And the net result was a final mini survey, which I think was about the 16-month mark. I believe his final score was 2.11, which that would be like a 70% improvement on it, on that leadership goal, which is pretty impressive, I thought, especially given the challenges he was facing.
Yeah, well, I mean, you've explained to me before as well that one of the things you love about the -3 to +3 scale is that it's evergreen. You can use this for the next 10, 15, 30 years if you'd like to use it, because leadership isn't a destination, it's a journey. And this measures, are you following the process of the journey? And I think that's great. What did you learn specifically from working with this leader to get such wonderful scores and, the 6-month mark and the 16-month mark?
Well, Brandon, I think the learning is that the stakeholders, there's several takeaways. The stakeholder-centered coaching process, as we've already talked about, is time efficient. And that was very valuable. I think it's, people just don't have time anymore. The world moves so fast. So that's what was important takeaway, is to really stress to the potential clients, anybody I'm talking to, they're going to have a concern. They're already super busy, right? I don't have time for this coaching. How am I going to have time for this? And I think I learned from you one time, it's a good question to ask, is say, well, how much time do you have each week for leadership development? Do you have an hour? Well, yeah. Okay. Well, then I won't take up any more time than that. So I learned that one from you, so time efficiency is very important. That's a key learning, and really take advantage of this process and don't take up any more of their time. Second one is that, the process just plain works. It's even in the most challenging environments. So don't stick with the process. Use as we have a coach's playbook, right? Which is really our guidebook. It's, sort of the Bible of how to follow this process. And as a coach, that's all we really are, is a facilitator here. Clients are going to learn something from me probably, but they're going to learn a lot more from those people that work around them. They're the real coaches. They're the internal coaches working directly with the leader. So follow the process, and it's so important that you stick to the process and you make sure those regular follow-ups are happening every month, and you do your best to get every stakeholder involved. And then the other one was just the key variable, like I said, to achieving that long-term change in effectiveness is not the coach. It's those key stakeholders. And so the first principle, or there's 3 main principles. The first principle of stakeholder-centered coaching is to focus on your key stakeholders. And I think if you just really do that, it's going to really deliver the results for you. And in this case, it stuck to that. So I think the last thing to really recognize a key learning is behavior change is hard. This was not easy for this gentleman to do, and it requires stepwise change over time. Successful behavior change requires that. It just isn't going to happen in a month or two or overnight.
Yeah, it's hard, and at the same time, it's not complicated. I can say from the research side, there's very specific ingredients that drive those outcomes of being perceived as more effective. But it's, as you say, it's not easy, but it's simple, not easy.
Simple, but not easy. Yeah. And so I think, just for, the audience here, anyone to, takeaways that I would have is that if you were a coach, use your coach's playbook, stick to the process. This process has been, I believe, done, 250,000 times around the world, right? It works in every culture, every country, every language, every business, every level of leadership. So you don't try to reinvent it. Stick to the process, and you'll get the results. And then stick to those key stakeholders. Really focus on those stakeholders. Keep them involved. And one thing that's really important too, you'll have the stakeholders a lot of times. Remember, they have to learn how to be good stakeholders, just as the leader is having to learn a new behavior. They're not used to this because in the business world, if you're imagine that going, your boss asking you for feedback. This doesn't happen. It's not normal. And in a lot of cases, you don't want to even volunteer that feedback. It might not always be a good career move unless it's really welcomed, right? And you really feel safe offering the feedback. So a lot of times the stakeholders will just say things like, keep it up, or you're doing a good job. And that's where you have to constantly coach the leader and to drill down on those questions. Okay, well, you're saying I'm doing a really good job. What exactly is it that you're seeing that I'm doing well? Is there anything that I'm doing that I should do more of or less of that would help me achieve my goal? You have to keep drilling down on those questions and getting them to open up to you, and letting them, and genuinely, really just genuinely thank them. Every suggestion is a gift. And so keep those stakeholders at the center of the process, and you'll get the results. And again, just remember, as a coach, like you say, the process is easy. You're more of a facilitator, and those people that are interdependent with that leader that work around them are going to be the ones that really drive the change.
Well, Dan, this has been wonderful talking about this leader. I'd love to ask, if I may, what other kind of leaders do you generally work with, or what kind of behaviors do you work with clients on fixing?
So my experience to this point, Brandon, is every behavior that I have worked on has been on that list of the 20 most frequently worked on. Yeah, I'm sure there's others that have been outside of that list. I just haven't experienced it yet. So I don't know. Maybe you could drop the list in the link here to the podcast, and people can look at it. I reading off all 20 of them is I don't think this is the right forum to do that, but they've all been on that list. If that answers your question, the type of leaders that I've worked with, I'm a businessman. That I spent 34 years in business, and so I attempt to stay in that realm. I like the business world. It's easy for me, especially wholesale distribution, transportation, those types of businesses, although somehow I ended up with a manufacturing business. So it really doesn't matter what business. I didn't really know a whole lot about manufacturing, but again, you're making and shipping products. So business leaders is the natural fit for me, though, I think.
Yes, Dan, that list of the 20 most improved leadership skills, we'll actually drop a link for that right at the bottom of this video. So be sure to go ahead and grab that. Dan, if I'm listening to this interview today and I'm getting the feeling maybe coaching is for me, maybe even Dan's the right coach, what could I know about myself that would tell me whether you and I would be a good fit for coaching?
I think, first of all, Brandon, I've been in the business world most of my life. I've been in the boardrooms. I've been involved in many acquisitions. I'm pretty much an expert in wholesale distribution of anything. So if you're in that realm, we'll have a natural connection. Second thing I think that's important to know is that my personal why is right way. Okay, so I believe that success happens when things are done the right way, predictable results. And so I don't know. I throughout my career, Brandon, I've seen a lot of people brought into the businesses that I worked in, and they'll bring on some new, be it executive or senior leader, whoever, and this person's awesome, man. They're going to be great, And something the rap that was put on me a few times in my career was that I was a slow decision maker. In other words, I liked going right back to my why, the right way, right? Predictable results. I need a lot of information personally before I really want to make sure it's the right decision. Once I believe it's the right decision, I become all action and I'm all in. So if you're someone that likes to do it the right way and get predictable results, then I could be the coach for you. And stakeholder-centered coaching process is absolutely a wonderful process if I do it the right way. And the problem is behavioral. We'll get the results. We'll get the predictable, proven results.
Thank you, Dan. If I'm out there listening to you today and I want to follow you, get in touch with you, listen to your story, how would I do that? How can people get a hold of you or follow your story?
Best way would be to email me, dan@clearpurposecoach.com. You can follow me on LinkedIn. All my contact information is on there, including my phone number. Reach out at any time.
Thank you, Dan, for that comprehensive look at the impactful potential of effective coaching and stakeholder engagement. In this episode, we explored how thoughtful decision-making and inclusive communication can lead to substantial growth for leaders and their organizations. We hope you're leaving today inspired to embrace change and engage closely with your teams for collective success. Remember, all the case studies of this season are available for download at mgscc.net/case-studies. The link can also be found in the episode description. And if you'd like to better understand the foundations of leveraging stakeholders and measuring results in your coaching, then join the free training program, Foundations of Stakeholder-Centered Coaching, where we share the philosophies and frameworks that guarantee improved leadership effectiveness in 12 months or less. You can register for the free course at mgscc.net/foundations-course. Until next time, this has been another episode of Conversations with Coaches by Stakeholder-Centered Coaching, where we believe everyone deserves a stakeholder-centered leader. Thank you for joining the conversation, and stay tuned for more stories of leadership transformation.